Anyway, this hour is going to be interesting. I saw your YouTube channel. I
Okay.
saw your website. You talk about things that I sometimes disagree with. Some of it I agree, some of it I disagree. So I figured, hey, I need to reach out to this dude. So
As you-
I'm gonna share those links in the description below so people can go check it out.
Okay.
I mean, look, my audience is mostly incels. You know what I mean?
Oh,
I think I have like 92% male audience,
wow.
um, mostly from United States and the UK,
Okay.
and mostly politically right wing, very anti woke. Uh, which is why I try to bring woke people to my podcast because
Mhm.
I kind of want to have two sides of the coin.
Okay, but
And
I'm not very woke, right? You know that,
yeah,
right?
man. So yeah, so we're gonna talk about um sexual
I'm
submission,
literally, if you talk,
patriarchy, there you
sorry,
go, gender
I don't,
roles, and all that type of stuff.
yeah, I don't want to
Um,
interrupt, sorry. But I'm not woke. I'm actually very central right wing in my ideas.
all right. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I've been called a extreme right wing before, which I'm definitely not because I consider myself actually very liberal.
Okay.
But people are gonna call you what they call you. So
Indeed.
anyway, um, well, let's start. Uh,
Okay.
I want to ask you, what's your take on Andrew Tate, by the way?
Andrew Tate is I consider him to be a personal friend of mine. I knew him before. He was already big when I first met him. I've met him multiple times, person to person, so face to face. I consider him a friend. What I've seen from him does not match the public image that they portray of him. Is a very, very different guy. Obviously, even online, the image that a lot of people have of myself, my crowd is mostly Muslim. The idea that they have of me as a Muslim is different than how I actually am personally. And I think it's the same thing with Andrew Tate. It's very easy to demonize people online. It's very easy to, paint an evil picture of them, especially if somebody has a vendetta against you and they know how to use social media. And I think that's what happened to him in a very, very big way.
Hmm. So, where do you think it's like the despair between the message that he's trying to tell young men and the message that the media is portraying him to try to tell young men?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious that there's a socialization program, if we want to call it that, in place to try and turn men into something that they're not. And it's actually been relatively successful for quite some time. So when Andrew Tate came out, he came out with a message that men just from their nature resonate with. You can't turn a man into a woman. I mean, we've tried as a society, we see how that's working out. But when he came along and he was like, be a man, do this, work hard, take care of your family, take care of your women folk, and all these types of things. That's stuff that men naturally resonate with. And when you have an entire society that's trying to, feminize men and emasculate them, then you're gonna land on their bad side because now you've got an entire media machine from the Netflix shows to the Hollywood that's trying to turn men into one thing, and then you come along and you have a good what do you call this reach with your crowd. Now it's a war, and it's a very difficult one to win because
Mm.
yeah, they own the entire
Well,
media industry.
I only go for I only go from what I've heard about Andrew Tate and what I've seen online. So I don't really know him personally.
Mhm.
Um,
Great guy.
to me, like from my point of view, what it seems is that there's nothing Andrew Tate won't do for views. Nothing, including getting kidnapped or kidnapping people. And I, you know, I don't see, I mean, what I'm missing from Andrew Tate is telling young men that the best thing that will happen in their life is having a long-term relationship and a stable family, because when you're 70, what are you going to do? I mean, there's nothing more sad than a 50-year-old bachelor sitting at a bar flirting with young women. This is what I'm missing from Andrew Tate. And this is the same thing I'm missing from the feminist dating coaches. I
Mhm.
mean, both of these people, they forgot to tell young people that, hey, a relationship is something that is probably going to contribute to your life very positive, positively.
Mhm.
And maybe, maybe you shouldn't be trying to have an upper hand on the opposite gender. Maybe you should try to fix yourself in the best way and look for someone. Well, vet people and eliminate people who are not appropriate for your desires
For sure.
instead of manipulating, sleeping with them, and then basically telling them to fuck off in order to feel like you have the power. I feel like it's not about power play. It's really not. So this is something I'm missing with Andrew Tate. I don't know. What do you like? Is that the case?
Well, in terms of views, he has learned how to definitely harness social media. So, to what degree he'll go
Mhm.
to harness, views and whatnot, that's a conversation I can't really have because I'm not involved with the social media thing. I haven't spoken to him in months now. Generally, I talk to him when I talk to him on X or like WhatsApp or something. That's been forever since I've done that. But anyway, I can't talk about that. He is very good at capitalizing on social media. I can't say that. I don't the times I was with him, there was people. We will be specific. There were women. They were like really, really bent on trying to get close to them. So I couldn't
Mhm.
understand the need to kidnap people when you've got like we'll just call them groupies coming at you in droves to be with you. It's kind of like the antithesis, and they're always very gentlemanly. From their rejections to they're like, hey, come have a seat and have some drinks and sit down with us and whatnot. Very, very polite. Very, I never saw anything from them that would like even remotely show that they have a need to kidnap people, especially women, in specific women. As for his stance on family and whatnot, that's very interesting because he has a family. I don't know if you know that. He does have several, or he did have several female partners, but he definitely has like his, if you want to quote unquote, wife, and he has children. He has a family. They've been together for quite some time, him and his women folk. I don't want to get into his personal life. I don't, I'm not going to act like I'm his best friend and I know everything about him, but I do know he does have children with, I think it's more than one woman, and those women have been in his life for quite some time. And as a proponent myself of polygynous marriages and families, not just sleeping around, but families, I find that like, absolutely amazing. What else was there? There was something else that you said that, but I missed it. Or did that answer all your
I
questions?
I forgot as well, but
Okay.
so
So
he does have a family. You see, that's even worse because that's like people preaching against climate change and then driving around in private jets. It's like you have a family
mm.
and you make videos titled "Never Settle." So okay, but
I don't know if he's
like
ever said that though. Has he
I'm
said
gonna
that?
yeah.
I don't recall a video seeing that. I don't spend a lot of time, even on his social media and looking at social media. I don't really consume a lot of content from other people.
Oh,
So I've
okay.
never
Well,
seen him
I do.
say
I do. It's not a good return on investment, I tell you that much.
it.
I well, um, what was I going to say? Yeah, so you know, I understand that, and even with podcasting, there are certain things that you can say that are gonna give you a lot of views. So, for example, I can appear and then bash all the men and speak about very controversial things, and that's going to give me views and that brings money, right? But you
Yeah.
can say the thing that is going to benefit your audience the most, which is be nice, have faith, look for a stable partner. It's going to help the audience, it's just not going to give you views. So when you're I assume when you're like a social media influencer, there's always dilemma between, okay, should I say this because this is what actually pays my bills, or should I say that but that's not going to give me views? So I think that not just Tate, but like a lot of people are in this dilemma. Should I be controversial and out there or not, so
Mm.
it's, well, anyway, Andrew Tate aside, um,
Can I just jump in there? His message that the one thing that I've regularly seen from Andrew Tate is that his message has been one of positivity for masculinity. Be a man, learn how to make money, get in shape,
mm,
learn how to fight, take care of your
mhm,
family. So there are other podcasts that are like Myron from Fresh and Fit podcast. He's a friend of mine also. I haven't spoken to him forever. But one of his messages is that sleep with as many women as possible before you settle for one, which I'm opposed to this message. He's my friend. I respect him as my friend, but I absolutely disagree with this message. It's the opposite of the message that I put out. So, a lot of times I think what happens is because these circles are relatively small and generally, there's a lot of crossover between these circles. The messages get conflated, like this is his message, but he was actually on the platform of someone whose message is this or that, and therefore he automatically agrees with it. And I'm not really sure. I can't really say. I've seen him on Fresh and Fit's podcast, and he was arguing with OnlyFans girls that this lifestyle is not appropriate, that you should actually try and get a family, and whatnot, as opposed to being on OnlyFans or selling yourself, be it physically or online. So yeah, I'd really have to like do a deep dive into like the messages and like start consuming the content to actually look at what he said to agree.
Right, right. Well, I mean, the lifestyle, I mean, I guess, it's their choice. If it's appropriate, is subjective. The only problem is that it's not gonna make you happy. The only problem is that you're kind of well, you're probably, unless you're a psychopath, you are probably sabotaging your future.
Absolutely.
Um, and well, maybe that's not a problem, but it's something that you have to know. And one thing I have noticed actually is that the society mm, gives women higher market value than, well, gives women the perception that they have a higher market value than they actually have. And as a consequence of that, a lot of women are looking for a man, I need a man who understands that I'm single type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they subconsciously feel like their man is cock blocking them if he is not way above their market value, right?
Yes.
If he's average or even or below them, I mean, that's just a disaster. But it is a problem because, well, there's just not enough. I mean, a woman who's 5'4",
Mm-hmm.
unemployed, single mom with 3 kids, and fat is usually looking for a man who makes 6 figures, has no kids, and is very fit, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
It's
and I
delusional.
think the reason for that is social media, because on social media, well, I mean, women are praised a lot more than men.
Mm-hmm.
They get likes, it's a very shallow indicator of your market value, and it's not
Absolutely.
real. Um, and I don't know. Well, that's one thing that I do agree with Andrew Tate about. So I want to ask you, what's your take on like the perceived market value of men and women and the difference between it?
I have like bifurcated views on this. So I do agree that in general, women do in general have a higher value than men. Women are born with an intrinsic value as females. A friend of mine, he said, women are more valuable than men, but men are more important than women. And I 100% agree with this. And he gave the example of two tribes, and each tribe has 100 people in it. There's 50 men, 50 women, and 50 men go out hunting, they get raided on, they get killed, 10 men come back. The tribe can still reproduce at the rate of 50 children per year. The tribe can recover. Now, the opposite happens with the other tribe. The other tribe, the men go out, the women get raided, there's only 10 women left, 50 men come back. The tribe can now only reproduce at the rate of 10 children per year. And then the men within the tribe will probably start killing each other to try and have reproductive rights with the women. The tribe has been catastrophically damaged. Women are, just by biological sense, more valuable than men. This is probably why we have the ingrained biology to protect strange women that we don't know on the streets. We see men, they jump into situations for women that they don't know to protect them. So I do agree that women do have an intrinsic higher value than men. But men are also more important because it's unarguable, as much as they'd like to in Western society, men are the builders and maintainers of societies. And there's nothing that anybody can debate or argue with this. We do have some matriarchal societies that still exist to this day. And we see that to this day, unbelievably, they're living in mud huts. They they defecate openly. They don't have like running sewage, running water. So men are more important than women. So it's I guess for lack of a better term, a yin and the yang. There is a balance, but it has been imbalanced by social media. Yeah, absolutely. And what it's done is it's allowed women to go online, and now from across continents and across the world, it's allowed them to get a sense of higher value because they get a lot more attention than they would in their regular environment. I give the example, and I don't think it's my example, but the example of like our great grandmothers. how much attention would she would have gotten in her heyday, in the peak moment of her absolute highest beauty? Maybe 70, 80 men. How many of those are actual serious suitors? Questionable. So she probably had a more realistic idea of what her local market value was. Now, had my great grandmother had access to the internet and then access to billions of men, she probably would have a secured idea of what she's actually worth in comparison to her local market. I'm a Muslim, and my crowd is mostly Muslim, and I say this to a lot of like Muslim women who are confused about what their market value is. I say, you work at ASDA. So do you really think this high, rich, powerful banker guy, you're on the same level with him? You treat him bad, but he's actually, in terms of what he's accomplished in life, he's worth more in terms of market value than you are, even though biologically you have a higher value. So my stance is, yes, women are more valuable than men, but there is a balance, and that balance has been lost because now, going back to what we were talking about earlier with the socialization, society has taught men that what they bring to the table as men is not valuable. And so we've lost this balance. Men now start to think that they have a lower value than they actually do, and women start to think they have a higher value than they actually do. It's all part of the socialization program.
Hmm. You see, I went to a debate into a debate with someone who is relatively extremely right wing, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we came to a well, we didn't come to a conclusion, but we had a debate about who is a better leader, a male
Mm-hmm.
or a woman, a male or a female.
Yes.
And well, my thing is, I believe that we equally suck at leadership. Okay, and if we
Interesting.
look at well, proof, right? Throughout the
Yeah.
history, men have been the leaders. So far it seems that it's been nothing but war. And you
Mm.
can say, well, that's how it that's how it was, but I think maybe intelligent communication is a next step in evolution. And it seems to me that if you as a leader step into a war, you failed by default, regardless of winning, losing, whatever, because the war is a result of you not being able to communicate intelligently, which is what human beings do. Just because we used to not have shoes, it doesn't mean we have to walk barefoot now. So I think that we have plenty of proof that men are not better at leadership. And now we have women stepping into politics, and we see the woke movement, we see where this goes. And now we also have a proof that women suck at leadership.
Mm.
And so I think you can say that a failure of male leadership is something like fascism,
Mm.
constant warfare, and the failure of female leadership is, well, communism
Okay.
and people not having identity. So to me, they suck equally. And I think that okay, um so what is your take on that? Because I assume that well, you are in a polyamorous relationship. I assume you are the leader of the family, and I
Absolutely.
think that as far as that goes, I think it's mostly related to personality
Mm.
of you folks in there. And I
Uh,
think that the person who is a let's say a leader of a relationship, so to speak, is a person who's more comfortable with making decisions as opposed to following them. Most of the time, that's going to be the male. Sometimes it's going to be a female, but it seems that more females than males are more comfortable following someone's decision making. Um, so anyway, where am I wrong? What's your take on this?
this is a pretty big conversation. I'm going to go on a pretty, I hope not a too excessively long rant here. So, and I'm in a polygynous relationship. Polygynous is where the man has multiple partners and the women have only me as a
Yes.
partner. Polyamory would be like everybody's kind of doing their own thing. Okay, so again, I'm Muslim. When Adam was created in Islamic text, Allah told the angels to go and look at Adam because Adam was made of clay, like they say in the Bible. Also, he was made of dirt, and he was drying. And the angels went and looked at him, and they came back and they asked Allah, "Why have you created one who will shed blood on the earth?" So the angels understood by looking at Adam that his nature would be one that's violent. So I do believe that violence is part of the human nature and condition. I don't think I think it's inescapable. When we look at like quote unquote nature, it's pretty violent. I mean, it's a matter of survival. And humans aren't very much, very much different. We do have higher intellect, obviously, by far, but I think that base nature is the same. We've been created with it. Now, here's the thing. I was having this conversation just last night with my wife. I have a Russian wife, and we were talking about this. And I was talking about how the Ukrainian war has changed military tactics as we know it. Real time, we are seeing technology advance greatly. And when we look at all of the massive and the greatest technological advancements, be it from computing to medicine to rocket science, it has all been related to war. The V-2 rocket was the predecessor to manned space exploration. The V-2 rocket we know was used to terrorize the United Kingdom in the Second World War. Cold water survival. The German forces, we'll try and use politically correct language for the video. The German forces developed cold water survival clothing for their pilots that were flying across the English Channel to go bomb the British. Pilots were being shot down. They were running out of fuel on the way back, and they were landing in the English Channel and freezing to death before they could be rescued. Cold weather survival gear came from that. A lot of the technology that, in terms of medicine, that comes from surviving, traumatic injuries, comes from war. And now we're seeing drone technology change warfare, where it's very dangerous for soldiers to be on the battlefield while drones are attacking people left and right. And the Russians just came up with a new technology. Drone technology. It's so every real, even the internet, DARPA and the internet is well known. The internet that we're using now is part of a military technology. The foundation of it is part of military technology. So advancements and human advancement does come from war. I don't think all wars are necessary. I'm having this conversation right now on my X where I'm basically arguing with the people how fiat currency allows governments to wage forever wars. I do think there are wars.
Mhm.
It's just they're resource wars, the territorial wars, and and those might be quote unquote necessary. Maybe they can be, they can be alleviated. What's the proper word? Sometimes I think in German here. Sometimes they can be avoided. That's the word. And other times they can't be because there's simply a conflict of resources. Like we'd have two wolves in one territory, and then they start fighting. I think humans are the same way. So I don't think in it of itself that war is a failure. Sometimes it is unfortunately a necessity. We have entire nations that are just aggressive. They have different ideologies. They have different concepts on what human life is worth and its value. And sometimes it's lower, sometimes it's higher, and that allows them to actually take actions against outsiders, aka in-group preference. The out-group is the enemy, and it allows them to just go and attack them because they're not part of the in-group. And what does the attacked nation do? Well, they defend themselves. It turns into a greater war. So I don't think war itself is an indication of failure. The issue that I have personally with female leadership, and female leadership in itself is not a problem. I mean, Islamically, there's an Islamic text that says any nation takes a woman as a ruler is destroyed. I work with women and they're in a supervisory position. They make very good decisions. They make very clear, concise decisions. I don't think like in that self, like if we go on corporations, whatever. But when we come to a nation, it would appear, and what we see is that women have a lower in-group preference than men do, meaning that they're more pro-immigration, they're more socialist, they have like ideas that are very different than men. I catch a lot of flack on X. I'm Muslim, I'm Black, I'm an American, and I live in Europe. And I don't want to see a bunch of immigrants coming here. I'm looking at people that look like me, and I'm like, what are you doing here? Because I have an in-group preference to the West in general because I'm a Westerner. And I've been to 51 countries. I've seen these countries, and I don't want what they have there here. And so my in-group preference to West in general, even though I have conflicts with people here in the West, and we're all from the West, sometimes they're white, sometimes they're Black. I don't really care about race and ethnicity. I'm married, mixed. But for me, it's like you're an outsider with a different culture, different ideology, sometimes with the same religion, but I understand your culture is incompatible with my culture and the way I want to live, even if we share the same religion. So it would appear, especially in Europe, that a lot of women are not opposed to this. And I don't think you can successfully run a country and a nation or an entire society, the Western one, with all the problems that we have already, if we have people in it that don't have a very strong in-group preference, over an out-group.
Well, it's a more I think it says more about the societal mindset than the actual president because, well, because I think if the society had their head on their shoulders correctly, um, the female president, the president that happened to be female, is actually going to be quite masculine. Well, in traits, right?
Yeah,
It's not going to be your average female. And I think that if the society had a different mindset, then women entering politics are not going to be the same women that are entering politics at the moment. So it's not
yeah,
necessarily the problem with females entering politics. It's, well, the question is, what type of females do we let enter? Because, obviously women are on the very large spectrum of personalities. You can get a
yeah.
woman who's
Right.
definitely a lot more masculine character-wise than a man. Well, I am like that, for example, or so I've been told, although I do try to be feminine and it's not working, but it's, you know, but so the woman in the leadership position, we have to remind ourselves that this is not your average woman who's going to be, well, because if she was, then she would be a housewife. I'm not saying that the average woman is a housewife, but she would be more likely to not be in this position, right?
I,
And also um with people being violent, well, violence has a lot of different forms.
mhm.
I think people, especially women, can be very violent mentally.
Oh, absolutely.
There's huge emotional abuse in relationships, and the abuser is mostly female, which is something we don't really talk about.
Don't disagree.
And, well, and as a woman, and I think a lot of women can agree, there's things that I can say to a man that I know are gonna produce a reaction, right? He's gonna get angry, whatever, he's gonna shout back, whatever,
Oh, women approach it that. Yeah,
not necessarily fighting that much, because right now, the fist fights are gone. We all carry our little buddies right now, so it's that's a new thing. So, but if I say that to a woman, I'm gonna be a lot more careful what I say to a woman, because she's gonna take it, she's gonna multiply it, and it's gonna come back tenfold for like days, weeks,
yeah,
maybe even years. The level that women take it to, a man is just not going to take it to this level. Um, just going clubbing with a male partner, a female party partner, it's different, because I mean, I still remember I was with a group of females. Like, man, these women get crazy. I remember we got into a fight, and she picked up a bottle and threw it, like, all, like, just somewhere. I mean, it splashed into pieces somewhere in the club. A man is not going to do that. So I think that women are crazier in that way.
yeah.
So the violence, I think, with females mentally is multiplied. So, can, in war, w- does it have to be a physical fight? Can it be a fight where I fuck you over that way and then you fuck me over in another way? And with Russia, that kind of is the case at the moment, because we see countries trying to screw Russia over without actually stepping into a fight, So I
Yes.
think that this is also a type of war that can happen. So the war doesn't necessarily have to be physical. I think women would be great manipulators, as leaders. So now we can have like a new version of war, right?
Mhm.
Which can be more destructive even than the actual physical war.
You know, I
Um,
I saw some historical text saying something to the effect that like the European queens waged more vicious wars than European kings did. I'm not
yes,
sure how exact that is or how accurate that is, but I would say let's look at like masculine leadership. We have a good example, Angela Merkel. Now, I consider Angela Merkel quite a masculine woman, even from her haircut to like just her suits. She never wore like female clothing. She was always wearing pantsuits and jackets and whatnot. She was always dressing quite masculine, behaving quite masculine. But we also know that coming back to immigration, that her immigration policies were absolutely catastrophic.
yep,
We're still reeling from it today. Then we have this new lady in Italy. I forgot her name, Melanie or something. She ran on an anti-immigration platform, and then when she got into office, what's her stance is kind of flipped again. Now she's not pro-immigration, but she's actually like kind of like fruity duty on it. So I'm not really sure if a masculine female leader is going to make a massive difference. Maybe it can, but maybe it can't. I mean, when we look at European leaders, nobody, be they male or female, holds the political power like Angela Merkel did. For whatever reason, she held a very strong sway globally and European, in the European Union and globally as a female leader. So it can be debated, it can be discussed. In general, yeah, I'm a more, well, anyway, my personal views don't matter. Now, as when it comes down to female violence, I have to wonder all the time, why is it that we as a society excuse female violence, both physical and emotional? We really
Yeah.
look the other way
Mhm.
when women are physically violent. We've seen all the videos online where they do these social experiments where the woman's attacking the guy and nobody does anything. And the moment the guy pushes the woman, everybody jumps in on the guy. But they ignored the fact that the woman was hitting him, and, slapping him and scratching him for the past 15 minutes. But then the moment the guy pushes her or something, everybody attacks the guy. So I have to wonder, as a society, why do we excuse female violence in general? So it makes sense
Because
that if we're
maybe
going
we
to,
w- well, maybe we see men as more disposable in a way, and well,
that,
there's a video actually. I just remember I watched a video of there was a female boxer, professional boxer, and I mean, women suck in sports by default, but she was actually really good. And God, I'm gonna eat flat for this. And she was sparring like a male amateur, and she beat the shit out of him, obviously, because she's training all the time and he's just not.
Mhm.
And just to show her superiority even more, she was not even wearing a helmet and she let him wear a helmet. And people were cheering her on and she was beating him up. And I don't usually write comments on YouTube, but this one really got me. And I said, well, that was one of the most pathetic things I saw. You have no integrity. This is horrible. And I would love to see you spar a professional male boxer. I would love to see that. Imagine if the roles were reversed. Imagine there was a boxer. Doesn't even have to be a professional boxer, just two boxers. And the boxer beat the shit out of the female boxer. Imagine the reaction. But now it was all about, ooh, we're dominating male gender. Yeah, because he doesn't train and you're like in the gym all day, every day, fuck off. So it's yeah, no, and the something I noticed, I don't know if you noticed, but in these videos, like street fights of male and females, like males fighting back, the woman is always like tiny as fuck. Let's say she's 5'7", and
Mm.
she hits a man who's 6'1". I mean, look, I mean, you're probably gonna take the punch either way. Why not go for someone your size? Why do you have to go for like the biggest man in the crowd? Like, there's a huge size difference.
It's the movie
Um, anyway,
socialization.
that's something I noticed.
It's
Anyway,
socialization again. When we look at Hollywood movies, most of the Hollywood movies now have females as the leading role and the heroine of
oh
the
yeah,
movie, and she's taking on
right,
guys that are bigger than me,
right,
and they're
right.
supposedly, special forces trained guys, and she's beating them up, and she weighs like half their size, and it's like, objectively, we haven't seen in reality anything like that. I mean, we have some exceptions like the one you described, but in general, the general rule is that the average man is going to just absolutely physically destroy a female in a hand-to-hand combat situation, which is why, like you
That's right.
said, the great equalizer is personal protection. This is, that's a different story though.
Well, the problem is that, see, discussing these differences between men and women, physically or mentally, there's some background noise. Sorry about that.
Oh,
The problem is that to each and every quality, we sort of prescribe a superiority or inferiority complex. And then, as we discuss, we subconsciously take these things personally. So, for example, you say men are physically stronger than women. And as a woman, maybe I automatically think, okay, stronger is superior. Therefore, he's saying that men are superior. Well, I feel super offended by that. I don't want to be inferior. And then
yeah.
maybe I can say, well, women live longer. And then you're going to be thinking, okay, so, well, that's a superior quality. I don't like that statement, right? Because so we always take it personally because, well, this is our gender. We want to defend it.
Uh,
I think the best neutral conversation to be had about men and women and the differences between the gender would be with two people who just don't have a gender. So I think from this perspective, it's impossible to have like a, well, not impossible, but it's very hard to have a productive conversation between the sex differences because, well, we're talking about us, you know? Yeah, and n-
I hear you, but
obviously we want to be better.
but then we have to. If this is the case, then we have to say that, you know, human scientific understanding has to be removed from all conversations also. I mean, we
Yes.
can't deny sexual
Yeah.
dimorphism. You know, sexual dimorphism is simply real. And on average, you know, the human male is between 15 to 30% larger than women. That means we have thicker, denser bones, thicker, denser muscles. Even our brains are larger. So that's not to say automatically you're better than a woman. That's it's you know these are different conversations in my mind. When I look at this conversation of sexual dimorphism in humans, where the males are larger than the females, I don't automatically like come from a superior. I mean, this is me personally. I can't speak for the the greater public or the globe, but this doesn't come with a superiority type of mentality to it. It's not a matter of you know men are superior to women. It just shows that we have different biological roles, and now what are they? We have to identify them. Because again, going back to my conversation earlier about yin and the yang, of men being more important, women being more valuable, there's always a balance in this. It's not just a black and white conversation that we have in terms of like superior, lack of superiority. And I think the problem is this, we can always throw this in there, the socialization conversation that has pitted men against women, and they're trying to make men and women enemies to each other. And so it becomes a competition as opposed to understanding of how we can improve our situation between and with one another as two different genders, as opposed to actually trying to compete with each other. It's not a competition. We're human beings. We're in this together. You know what I mean? I think one of the best things that could actually happen to humanity is to have an alien force invade the planet. I don't think anybody would be talking about black or white or Indians or this one, male, female. We'd be like, it's us against them. We'll get back to hating everybody and hating each other and arguing with each other when these aliens are dealt with. We would see a unity that would be crystal clear. I think that happens. I think, yeah, we're going to be stuck with these competition, competitive conversations between the genders, between the ethnicities, between this, between that, whatever else. And the reality is, there's only one Earth. We're all on this boat together. We don't have to, hang out, hold hands, and lick each other, but we do need to figure out how we're going to operate on this planet together as a species and as two different genders. That's my take.
Well, I think the best thing to do is just tell everyone, look, and I think this is where we might disagree.
Mhm.
I wouldn't even dive into gender roles. I would
Really?
tell people, look, we don't have any roles. Create your relationship as you seem fit.
Okay.
Have a leader, have a follower. Don't have a leader, do whatever the fuck you want, you know. You can have a turtle be the head of the household. We don't care. We'll just let people do what they do. And then I think that just naturally what we're going to see is we're going to see the man being the provider in the household 60, 70% of the time, and then 50 or 40% of the time maybe not, and then 30% of the time it's going to be a woman. I would say just structure the way you see best fit, because I think that as we, well, evolution is still happening, and as we progress we are going to see differences in just like the biological character of people. I
Mm,
think women now, just society aside, everything aside, because of the environment that is a lot more comfortable, have become more masculine because they don't have to depend on someone else. And I think that men, as the society gets more comfortable, have become more feminine as well. And
mm,
this is not necessarily a good or a bad thing. This is just a sign that the society is becoming more and more comfortable. Our lives have become more convenient, and as we progress it's going to become even more convenient. Now,
mm,
in terms of technology, and not having to have such a huge labor force, and not having to literally fight for food. So I think this is a good thing, and I think that what we should do here is we should have like a libertarian view on the gender roles, and see how people function, what works for them, what makes them happy, and then go by that, as opposed to saying, look, in the tribes, this is what women did, this is what suited men. Yeah, but we're not there anymore, though.
mm.
And I think that we should have not really a reconstruction of gender roles, definitely not a switch in gender roles, but
Yeah.
something that seems to suit people well and make them happy. So instead of saying, look, man should be the provider and the woman should stay at home. Well, what about women like me? I don't want to stay home. I that's just not my character. And
Mm.
what about someone telling a woman, look, just focus on a career. You don't have to have a family. Fuck that. You do you, girl. And then she's 50 or 60 and she's like, well, actually, no, I do want to have a family. What the fuck were you guys telling me? So it's, we have to have an open mind and we have to let people decide what works for them. Let people decide who's going to be the leader in their household, who's going to be the head of the household. And also just let people decide what they want to do as their occupation and then see what they're interested in and leave them the fuck alone. And also, I think that having a gender ratio in politics is, I mean, it's just awful because you're putting people there who are not as capable as
Ethnic
other
ra-
folks. I think
ethnic ratios are bad.
Finland or Norway, they have like a rule
Black
that it
people
has
in
to be
politics just
50%
because
female. Well, fuck that. Like, why are you making it about gender? Aren't you the one who said it's not
it should
about
be
the
about
gender at all?
anything.
And
It should
also,
be about
the
best.
army. Um, well, I want to hear what's your take on women being in the being Navy SEALs and entering the armed forces,
Okay, so I'm gonna try and address as much as possible that I haven't forgotten.
please.
Um, when it comes down to gender roles and families and how they're structured, obviously, I personally don't get into other people's like lives and how they want to live it. I do have my ideas of what I think works the best. I think what we know works, and that's what our ancestors did because they had more healthy and more lasting relationships. They were obviously doing something right, and they had basic standard gender roles in the past. So I think that works. Another thing to support this is, and I can't remember which Nordic country it was. It was one of the Nordic countries, Finland, Norway, or something like this. They did a study where it's like it's the most gender equal society there is, they say. And they showed that generally men and women went into certain career fields that were expected, that were gender based, career fields. And families structured themselves based around gender understandings as we know it, like, traditional gender roles. So I think it's just like I said. This goes back to the nature of how we're created. We Muslims, we call it fitra, the natural state. That men are, they have a propensity to behave in a particular way, and women, they have a propensity to act in a particular way. And this is related to our biology. Obviously, women are obviously going to be more nurturing and more home builders because they have children. They're the ones who carry children. It makes sense that they would have more of a quote unquote nesting nature than men would, who are meant to provide for the women. And that's why men like to wander and go out and hunt and do crazy stuff and be running out in the bush, because that's part of our nature biologically. You mentioned something about, like, it wouldn't be bad if when society becomes more advanced and food becomes more readily available with less work. I disagree with that because I don't know if you ever saw the Great Mouse Utopia experiment. I think the more we look
No.
at it, oh my, look into that. I think we see more and more of that with the advancement and the easing of how society operates. We're seeing more and more of that problem. So basically, Great Mouse Utopia was, I forgot his name, the experimenting guy who did it. He took a big cage and he put a bunch of rats in there, and he tried this with different types of rodents, all different species of rodents. The results were always the same. He gave them everything they needed. He gave them food, water, shelter, and it was free of predation. There was no predators there. And at first, the society bloomed, the population increased, and then there was a sudden halt in the population numbers increasing, and it started to sink. And then you found that the female mice, rats, rodents of all types, they stopped taking care of their young. The males stopped becoming interested in women. They began pruning themselves only, looking good. And we see this with workout culture and all this type of stuff. And they stopped reproducing
Mhm.
until the society collapsed itself. And I think we're looking at humans right now. I don't think, again, we're all biological creatures. And I think if you give too much too easily, you look at a collapse. Now, I'm not saying we need to artificially like install hardships, but at the same time, it can't be too easy. It just simply goes against our nature. Now, my stance on what was the last question? My stance on, yeah, I got lost.
Mm,
Nephew, women in my
women in the army, yeah. But I just want to return to something you said previously.
Mhm.
Still, the natural state, well, maybe the natural state is changing, and by having a comfortable society, I don't necessarily mean that. you put the hardships away. What I'm saying is that you make the society comfortable enough so that we don't have to depend on each other the way we used to depend on each other, so that women don't need men for like physical protection. That so like in a very fundamental way, not necessarily make it comfortable to the point where you just
Mm.
sip pina coladas all day and lay on beach and eat pancakes.
I
Maybe,
don't.
maybe just going from like the fundamental dangers into a society there is more, well, that is more comfortable. Maybe that already starts to change like the natural state. And I
Mm,
think that not having like female male dynamics and actually having anyone be asexual and neutral, um that I don't know, because I don't know how the character and our biology is going to change as we progress. One
it,
thing I do know
that's the
is
point.
that we don't want to work against it. So we do not need drag queens
No.
reading stories to young children
Yes,
because
sir.
they have
Ooh,
no legacy and
correct.
they need to leave their legacy somehow, so they target children. Um I would so here I would kind of hmm, I don't know how to regulate it, but we want to make sure that we don't regulate it too much from
Yeah.
each side. So we don't want to like actively work on making society asexual or reversing gender roles, but also we don't want to regulate it from the other side where we want to force people back into gender roles because that's how it used to be.
Mm.
So that's my libertarian stance. Just let people do what they do. And equality for me is actually the equality of opportunity.
Yeah.
So, and not equity. So if
No.
we have a society where women choose different occupations than men in general, and that makes them happy, to me, that's a very equal society. And a
This is my
society
answer
where we have
to.
gender ratios in each and every profession, to me,
That's.
that's a society just gone astray. And I
But this
I
answers your
don't
question.
agree with any one of these approaches.
Yeah. This answers your question and how I feel about female Navy SEALs. They should have the opportunity to be a SEAL, but that doesn't mean you're going to actually be one. I mean, we know that the Navy SEALs, they have very, very rigorous standards. I had a son that, went for the Navy SEALs. I don't know if he made it or not. We stopped talking around that time, but they have exceptionally high physical standards and expectations. And I don't think those should be lowered just because you're a woman or whatever else. Either you meet the standard or you don't, because our enemies, they don't care about equity. They don't care whether or not, like, oh, it was fair or not fair, or if you felt it was fair or not. They just want to defeat you. And so, we need the absolute best of the best, and being the absolute best of the best. And I believe with leadership, also with places of employment, that has no connection whatsoever to your gender, your ethnicity. It has everything
That's
to
right.
do with your outcomes and your performance.
That's right.
Entire, from top to bottom. This is from, again, this comes from ethnicity, this comes from gender. Any sort of quotas are absolutely out the window. Give everybody the opportunity to fail. If you fail, hey, nice try, buddy. Come back next year, apply again when you're better. I don't want anybody giving me a job just because, you poor black guy, here you go, take these free handout. It could be a job, because you just suck. No, let me suck so I can improve.
Mhm.
Maybe I won't improve, and that's just my lot. That's just how it is. We don't have to like it. I don't have to like it. My ego's going to have to swallow that. That everybody has a place in society. I'm in a place. I'm in a very, very technical company, and sometimes I get involved in conversations and I'm like, I am above my pay grade. These guys they're super nerds. They look like super nerds. They sound like super nerds, and I don't understand a word they're saying, except for the language itself. But what they're actually talking about, I'm like, yeah. Do I need to be in this meeting because I don't know what you guys are talking about, so I can't help you? When you need some actual help, in my field, call me. And they call me the super geeks because they're lost in my field. And although they have an understanding of it, execution might be a problem for them. They're good at the actual conceptualization. And I'm the one who actually makes it happen as a construction manager. So
Mm.
I don't want free handouts. I don't want to see free handouts. I don't have to carry the weight of somebody else. And I don't want somebody else thinking I got to carry this guy's weight. Look at him, he's a bum. It's not, I mean, anybody who has any sort of self-pride or ego, be they male or female, they would absolutely abhor this. They would absolutely hate to have this happen. So it's the same thing with the Navy SEALs. Yeah, it's like, yeah, okay, you're a Navy SEAL, but I've got to carry, the weight of the log for you because you can't carry it yourself. Do we really want that? I don't think so. As a
This
society as
is
a whole.
I think this was the basis of like fundamental old school feminism. Give
Mm,
everyone equal opportunity and then see how cards play out. And if they don't play out the way we would like them to, then, well, they played out the way they should. I'll tell you where we go wrong in my country. This is something that I recently found out, and it was just devastating. If our army was more important than it is, which is not important because we just suck at defending ourselves, obviously, I would be concerned even more. So we have a lot of women in the army, like a lot. It's
okay.
not 50%, but it should be 40 at least.
Okay.
And well, the reason for that is because we have different tests that we put these people through, right?
Hmm.
And I went through the qualifications, and the qualifications for women to enter the army are actually a lot easier than the qualifications for men. Now, I I don't know. Maybe when we do get into a war, maybe the enemy's gonna see, oh, that's a female soldier. Let's use like a different weapon, or maybe I don't know. Maybe, but I doubt it. And to I mean, to me, it's like even as a woman, if I enter the army, everyone and myself, we know, yeah, but you didn't really meet the criteria that we have to met. Like, you're here, but you're not really qualified. We know you're here for political reasons. You have, like, this is just really, you should get the fuck out of here. And I think that we should, well, open the doors up for women to enter, to become a Navy SEAL, to enter the armed forces, but have the same qualifications as, well, have the same criteria as we do for men. So I think that what would happen if that was the case was that would be that we would have maybe the army that is 1% female, maybe there's one woman per 100 men, maybe five, hey, maybe 10, maybe zero. But the army forces are really not the place to play political games. Like, this is about the safety of your citizens. I think this is inexcusable. And my country is doing it big time.
We
So,
see.
and also as a woman, I feel more respect if I am expected to go through the same qualifications as the male, so
Soldiers. Yeah.
as males that
Mm,
I'm doing the tests with. Like,
yeah.
I think that giving expectations to someone is showing respect. The more you expect of me, the more you respect me, because you do believe that I could be capable of doing that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, anyway.
Um,
um
just going back to this, the enemy is not going to use special weapons on women. And this is why Ukraine is such a very good real time understanding of like how things really work. Ukraine has now been
mhm.
sending women to the front lines, and the videos and the photos coming out of that, it's we already feel bad in general looking at men getting blown to bits. Now, when you see women lying in trenches, face down, obvious women, long hair, different builds, and they've been butchered in the same sense. And it is a butchery right now. It's a meat grinder. They're just throwing men and women now in waves at the Russians, and they're getting killed in waves. It's not a nice picture. We understand that when you face off against an enemy who is determined, they are not going to differentiate. They probably can't differentiate between a man and woman on the battlefield because the modern technology doesn't allow for it. Again, we come back to drone warfare. When a guy's flying a drone at 90 miles an hour that's explosive into a pit or into a trench where there's soldiers hiding, that drone pilot's not looking whether they're men or women. He's looking at somebody who's aiming a gun at me and my brothers, trying to kill them. And so it is my absolute obligation as a soldier to kill you. And I don't care if you're a man, I don't care if you're a woman. And it's very ugly. I have no
Well,
connection
I
to
mean,
it whatsoever. And I hate to
it
see women in the trenches dying. It hurts less when we see men doing it, but it's like when you see a woman in her prime in a trench, face down, blown to bits, it's kind of like it hits different. And
hmm.
the enemy is not going to be merciful. So be merciful on yourself and your female citizens. Train your men properly, make sure they're the best, and don't send your women into freaking war. What are you doing? It's the wildest thing to me. Yeah.
Yeah, to me, it wouldn't hurt me, but I'm psychopathic anyway, so I'm not really like a good measure.
You should maybe see the video.
But
It's not a nice
but
look.
I however, I do believe that if a woman qualifies, that she should enter the then she should become the Navy SEAL. And that, well, if you have a woman who's qualified enough, means she's more qualified than the majority of men to become the Navy SEAL, for example, then that's a woman
Fair.
that's going to be laying on the ground, because that's well, because with her you have a better chance of defending citizens than with someone else.
Fair.
So I think sometimes, if we open the doors
Yeah.
and some women somehow gets in, then I think this is just something that we'll have to suck it up.
But
And
I
the
think
danger is that maybe we can start seeing them as more disposable and less of intrinsic value. But I think that this is, well, but not a lot of women will enter in the first place. It's gonna be like a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage. And so
this comes back to
anyway,
my initial
um,
point of being a man, and our nature is to protect women. Even if I understand she's highly qualified, more qualified than probably me, just from my basic masculine nature as I've been created, it's a part of me to where it's like, this is not something a woman should be involved in. This is something that we would prefer, even if she's more qualified than me. I would rather send 10 men than that one woman and watch her get blown up. Now, yes, this comes back to, do we value female life more than males? Yes, we do. But this comes back to the two tribes thing: 100 men, 100 women in each tribe. So this is not something that we're going to take this ingraining out of like men. For you as a female, it might make sense to have like a different ideology like that. But for me as a man, it absolutely screams against the nature that I've been provided with inside of me in terms of what I want to see for women in general. Even if they're not my women, just in general, even if it's the and women of my enemies, I'm like, yo, I think to myself, I watch some of the videos and the Russian soldiers, they're cussing. They're like, what the hell is going on here? Why? He's walking through trenches and there's dead women lying face down, and you can hear it in his voice. He doesn't like it. He's like, what is going on here?
hmm,
Why are they sending women here? No man wants to go out and like apps unless he's like one of those psychopath killers, and we won't escape, human predation amongst humans. We do have predators amongst humans. We have the sheep, we have the sheepdogs, and that's our police, our military, whatever else that protects us from those people within our society that are predators. But in general, when men, even when they're predators, aka soldiers, they do not want to predate on women in general. So
hmm.
it's really, I just don't. I'm even qualified. I wouldn't like to see women on the battlefield. I think women have places in the military and jobs they can do, but I don't think the front line is one of those places. That's my opinion.
Yeah, this is where we defer. I would put a woman on the front line if she qualified. I wouldn't give a fuck. Just go out there. Just sit there, I don't know, blow yourself up, whatever the fuck. You can do whatever you want.
There's no choice you can do.
Um,
I just wouldn't want to see it.
I mean, I don't want to see anyone getting blown up. I don't want to see
Yeah,
anyone like being
fair.
shredded to pieces. But I think that if we know what the rules are for entry, then if I see a woman getting blown up, I'm gonna be, well. I mean, she signed up for it. She qualified. She probably did her best. I mean, it is what it is. I
Yeah,
think I think this is kind of similar to, and Andrew Tate said that, by the way. He said that if he was on a plane and if a female pilot walked in, he would be a little bit more anxious than if it was a male pilot. Now, I don't think he would necessarily leave the plane, but he just said that he would feel a little bit more anxious. And my take on that is automatically, yeah, but you don't know the process of what it takes to become a pilot. When someone steps in, male, female, alien, whatever, it's not up to you to decide how qualified they would be if something happened.
indeed
They
true.
are qualified. That's why they're there. So your fear of
Yeah,
that being a female, it has no grounding and no fundamentals, because
I
she's
agree. I
she's
disagree.
already pre-qualified to
Yeah,
handle the plane when something goes wrong.
I
You have
agree.
no reasons to feel anxious just
Yeah,
because it's a female. It's already determined. She has this. You're all right. You're good. You know, all the
fair.
tests have been done. She's in there. You're fine. But
Yeah,
so this is something I really
I
I
agree with you.
disagree with that.
I agree with you. The person that if they qualify according to the standard, then fine, go ahead and fly. The problem is we understand, and we discussed this just a few moments ago, is like a lot of times the standards are changed in order to meet quotas. And this is the problem. We don't know if that's happened. because in everything we see now and everything we do in our society, especially in the West, qualifications and standards are being changed to meet quotas. And so now we have unqualified women, we have unqualified Black people, we got unqualified Indians, we got, but there's no mercy on white people. It's like, y'all always got to meet the qualification, So this is a pretty big conversation. It's like, I understand the fear because like, okay, did you meet the qualification or did they change them for you? But an old white guy, that guy had to go through, he went through the ringer. They squeezed him, to make sure he's qualified. In that sense, and I'm not saying I want to see racism come back, but in that sense, when we look at like, Tuskegee Airmen who were the Red Tails in World War II, they absolutely hated Black guys and they didn't want them flying airplanes. And so they made it as difficult as possible for them to actually fly. You knew those pilots were good. You knew those guys were qualified because they tried their best to fail them. Bring back a standard like that. I want the guy who, no matter what obstacle you threw in front of him, even unfair ones, he passed. But right now we don't have that. We don't have that rigorousness. We don't have anybody like putting people through the rigor. And then now we've got like, someone, we don't know what their qualifications are. We know they have the qualifications, but we don't know the standard. Has it been changed? Flying 300 plus people around the world. It's terrifying.
Well, I mean, as I said before, this is actually, to me, that's a true show of respect because to me, respect is when you expect the same of me as you would to my male counterpart, or if I'm white, or if I'm Black, the same as you would to my white counterpart. Because, and like, to me, if I want to enter the army, let's say again, this example, and there's a list of qualifications that I have to meet, and I see that they're not the same as for males, I'm gonna say, well, fuck off. I'm not gonna do it. Like, I'm not gonna
Right.
do it because if I enter, I'm not even maybe even qualified. I'm just being here because of the quotas.
Yeah.
So this is the real respect shown. Expectation means respect. Now, the outcome is the truth. What are you gonna do against the truth, right? So, okay, um, I want to touch on your relationship,
Yeah.
polygyny. I think you said polygyny. So, also, you said that let's see, in one of your articles, uh, your desk is gonna look clean, but but the house will be a mess or something like that. So what did you mean by that?
I don't remember that. I say a lot of crazy stuff sometimes on social media. I
Oh,
don't.
polygynous household. The rest of the house will be a mess, but your desk will look clean. This is for men who want to move another woman into the
Okay.
house, but
Yeah.
they're not
I don't think I
sure
wrote
of
a
the
copy for
logistics of
that.
the household.
Yeah, my copywriters did. I hire copywriters, so what they wrote, I actually don't even read my copywriter's copy. I'm just like, I trust you. Here's the money. So I'm not really sure what he
All
says there.
right.
But, I mean, in a sense, your woman will, when she really is into you, she'll take care of your stuff and at the cost of other things. I know that for a fact. Other things will be put to the side, and they will be sacrificed in order to keep you happy in general. So you know, chalk it up like that. If
All
that
right.
answers.
Well, in in wait a minute. Okay. Um, in general, do you think that we are monogamous by nature, or do you think that just biologically men tend to be more inclined to mate with multiple women?
I think I had this conversation recently also with a woman, and I do believe that there is definitely a strong inclination to be polygynous amongst men. That doesn't mean that all men are going to be or should be polygynous. I think polygyny is not for all men. I think this comes back to biology. And this is the conversation I was having with a lady because she was struggling with the idea that she should be in a polygynous relationship with a guy. She's struggling to meet like an individual man who actually has his stuff together. And I'm like, the man you need, he has his stuff together and he probably has a woman already. I'm not encouraging her to get into it, but I'm just like, you probably have to broaden your search because she's 31 and she's starting to freak out because she doesn't have a partner or kids. Male men from a biological position, we can produce roughly, I can't remember what it was. It was a crazy number of sperm per day, millions of sperm per day, to the point that a man in his lifetime can easily impregnate, if you took sperm for sperm, individually, and you had a successful pregnancy, every woman on the planet, a single man can. and we can produce multiple millions of sperm per day. A woman produces roughly 2 eggs in a 30-day period. So it makes sense. This doesn't match? Our reproductive readiness doesn't match. So female reproductive readiness is during her ovulation cycle, and when she can actually like receive sperm and then become pregnant. And a man can just produce sperm every day, all day, without fail, as long as he's a healthy individual. So if we're looking at two healthy individuals, our reproductive timelines don't match at all. I'm ready every day, any day. And although she can, get into the act of intimacy daily, her ability to reproduce is not a daily one. So it makes sense biologically that men are ready to reproduce with multiple women. And we have de facto quasi-polygyny via pornography. Men like variation in women. They like it. This is why pornography exists. Pornography is predominantly not aimed at women, but who are probably the primary actors in pornography. It's women. We see this with OnlyFans and all these different like pornography sites. It requires a large amount of various women in order to survive, because men visually need variation in women. And so even if he's not polygynous, most of the time, either societally or on the internet, he's fulfilling his hindbrain's need for polygyny just by, eye candying other women. So I think that's in our nature. That doesn't mean you have to act on it. I tried to be monogamous and it brought out negative attributes in myself. And when I'm polygynous, these negative attributes disappear in some men because they can't deal with multiple women, because they're, it's not all just, intimacy, sun, rainbow, and good food. There are ups and downs. Some men, they go into it and they can't handle it. It brings out negative attributes, and monogamy is more suited for them. So I think it comes back into human nature also in terms of like what's capable. But I think it's unarguable that if you gave the man the opportunity to be sexually active with multiple women without consequence with his primary woman, he would probably do it. Most men would do it.
There's also a question of what would happen if you give that opportunity to a woman and you put away the societal strengths and the judgment.
Well, I think we see it
I
right
don't
now.
know. I think, well, we are starting to see it, and it seems that the women are very excited about this opportunity. Now, there's a question again for both genders: how happy does that make them in the long term? Because
Well,
I
we see it.
don't know anyone who has been sleeping around for like a couple of years, maybe even decades, and then say, "Ooh, that was a good decision. I'm happy." And I think that, polygamy, I would argue that by nature, your argument is well, it's a very good argument, but by nature, it seems to me that in the animal kingdom, the species who are polygynous, well, the opposite gender does not experience jealousy. And you can't say that about humans. And also, there seems to be like a natural gender ratio of, let's say, more females to males,
Hmm.
just genetically. And with humans, that's not the case. Actually, in most of the countries, there like the ratio to male to female is there's less than 50% females in that country, in most countries. And I took that data from like the statistical website that is trusted, because you have like numerous data out there. um so I think that these two things are well, they're going to be hard to argue, but because how do you explain that if we are polygynous by default?
Well, this comes back to like what we were talking about with like, the war being failure. When we bring this down to the personal relationship level, we start looking at the desire for resource protection. And in women, this could be actual physical resources in terms of like what he provides to his woman. Will it be reduced if he takes on another woman? It's a fair argument for a woman to have, in my opinion. A woman shouldn't have to suffer, economically because you want to, get some strange on the regular. It's not like that. If you can afford the relationships and the families, or you can't. At the same time, there's also the emotional investment. So I think it's fair that women are jealous. But obviously, we see quite a few women, the further on we progress, are in relationships with quote unquote high value men, to where it's like, okay, I'm willing to sacrifice certain things in order to be with this guy. And I understand that some of that is like, I have to swallow my pride in terms of my jealousy. I think being jealous is absolutely fair. I don't really have an argument against women being jealous. I mean, when I look at my example is the Messenger of Allah, peace be upon him, Muhammad. His wives were jealous. They were very jealous women. His favorite wife, and a man usually does have a favorite wife, was Aisha, and she would get very jealous. She would follow him around at night to make sure he wasn't going to his other wives on her night. When his other wives would send food, she'd smash the plate. These aren't negative attributes; they're human attributes. And this is what I think. Maybe what we're seeing here between you and I is a fundamental difference in how we view these things. I don't view jealousy in it as itself as a negative attribute. I think it's a necessary one to
Hmm.
me.
Okay.
But
But it's
how
still like a natural predisposition. You can still say that, well, we are jealous. That goes totally against our biological inclination to be polygamous because in the animal kingdom, again, polygamous species, there's no jealousy there.
no, I wouldn't say that. I think this is a matter of like this comes back to okay. So animals they have obviously different ways. They make guard. Even females make guard in some cases. Not always. This is resource protection. So this is our animalistic side showing in a different way. The male is responsible for resource and territorial protection with the females. And even at a certain time up until reproduction, usually female animals either have a territory or they wander territories until a male comes and they come into their territory. So this is not something that they generally have to worry about up until they start reproducing, right? I mean, after they start reproducing, up until they're reproducing, they're technically on their own. So I think in humans, it's like the expectation is, in terms of the male and his resources and whatnot. I'm not really sure if I'm on topic here or I'm on tangent, but the male is responsible for that. And so it makes sense for her to have this resource protection guarding type of mentality because generally, yeah, I think I kind of lost my topic and my point. I think you know what I'm saying though. It makes
But I
sense.
know, yeah, yeah, yeah. I know totally. Yes, yes. But
It
there
makes
also
sense.
seems to be like a huge component of sexual jealousy. So, because then you can say, yeah, well, a woman is going to be jealous if a man is providing for another woman, but she's
Yeah.
not going to be jealous if he sleeps with her. But women seem to be pretty damn jealous if a man, even if he's only providing for her, if he then goes and sleeps with another woman.
Sexual jealousy I haven't seen so much. I mean, I've been for a very long time in polygynous relationships and marriages, and sexual jealousy has been a lower one, simply because my experience is that women are more, and this is not saying that we're getting together or anything, but in generally, women are more sexually adventurous than men are. Men are more sexually desirous than women are, but women are more adventurous than men are. And so generally, this is not something that I've seen. I've seen it a few times, but sexual jealousy is not one of them. So that's my personal take. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I can only speak for myself. I'd have to ask some of my community and say, hey, is your wife jealous that you go and sleep with another woman? And this is not really a conversation that I've had with a lot of people because I do one-to-one consultations with guys in these situations also, and it's generally not related to this topic. Um,
I would just sorry for interrupting, but maybe ask outside of your community. Well, depends on who your community is, because if your community is people in like polygamous relationships, then that might not be a good indicator. But
mm,
I think that if we ask 100 women, would you be jealous if your man stays with you? You guys are together. Hey, it's your household. Nobody is coming in. But if he then sleeps with another woman, I
mm.
think, I believe over 70, over 80% of women would mind.
This is interesting because I watched a video of Japanese women,
Mhm.
and a man was going around asking these women this question because my YouTube feed, of course, is going to be related to this topic. And he says, "Is it cheating if your husband visits a prostitute?" And they said no. So this was a Japanese interview, and it had English subtitles. I don't know if I can find it, and I'll send it to you. But
Okay. Yeah,
it was
yeah, yeah.
I saw it maybe like 3 months ago, and he was going around asking the women, it's like, is it cheating if he visits a prostitute? And the Japanese women, I'd assume they're not Muslim. I'd assume they're not in polygynous relationships. They said no, they don't consider it cheating. Now, this could be an exclusively
Hmm.
Japanese cultural type of thing. Obviously, we're Westerners and they're Easterners, so they might have a different mentality in that altogether. I would like to see like a similar social questionnaire thing going on happening, maybe say Germany or UK or the US. I'd be interested. I do think the answers would be
Mhm.
significantly different because we have different ideas and concepts in the West on what relationships are.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true. But also with, I mean, just naturally wise, it's the gender ratio just does not allow for this dynamic to take place though.
Yes and
Because
no.
in that case, have to be a lot more female births if we were meant for like a polygamous relationships, I think.
I had this conversation with some guys who were saying that polygyny wrecks the marriage slash relationship market. And I said, you know what? If a woman doesn't want you, she doesn't want you. You know, the simple fact of the matter is just because I don't have two doesn't mean you're automatically going to get one. If you're a loser, you're a loser, and no woman's going to want you because you're a loser. That's why you need to go work out, get your money right, get your social status right, you know, your social acumen and all that. You need to get everything together and be the package that women generally want. Just because all the polygynous men give up to women doesn't mean all those womenless men are going to get women automatically. I'm pretty sure that the guys that are struggling with women now would be struggling with women if there was too many women on the market. It's like you're just unattractive. You know, it's sort of like what they try to do to men. They try and tell us that, you know, big is beautiful, you know, and it's like, no, no, it's not. And you could fill the market with big, huge women. That doesn't mean I'm going to automatically pick you just because, you know, the availability of thin, fit women is very low. That doesn't mean that at all. You know, so I think it's the same.
Biologically wise, but biologically wise, let's say you have a ratio of 50-50, 1 to 1. So does that mean that just by default, the nature assumes that a lot of these men are going to be left without a partner and that a few of the men are going to have multiple partners? Because,
Yeah, they were
what's
showing
the role of the other half of males then?
they were showing the genetic map of like Europe somewhere. I can't remember what it was. And it was something like 30-something% of men historically reproduced in Europe. This has just been standard.
Hmm.
I think this is a matter of like reproductive fitness. So in the wild, we were speaking about the wild, the strongest will reproduce, or those with the best survival attributes for the environment that they're in, they're going to survive and naturally they're going to reproduce. And that's going to strengthen in the next generation those attributes. So it's like a chain reaction. I think we see the same thing happening in human society. Those who can't adapt to the new market, the new sexual market, whether we like it or not that it's changed, it has changed. You have to be adaptable. That's going to be an attribute that you want your children to have, adaptability. It doesn't have to be just to the sexual market, but that is a good indicator that you have adaptability in general. Before, it was survivability attributes in humans. You had to be able to hunt, you had to be able to survive disease and famine and whatnot. You had to have like the mentality, not the mentality, the intellect to actually, you know, take care of not only yourself but your family and your offspring in order to reproduce. Well, now that's, like we were saying earlier, that's kind of covered. Society is generally safe from, you know, animal predation. Nobody has to freeze to death. But now you have to be able to meet the new standards. And of course, we don't want to say that men have to jump through hoops in order to be with women, but the reality is a lot of what any species does, including humans, is done to be able to reproduce. And so now the new standard is set. Can you adapt to it? Well, that adaptation is now resource building. And if you don't have the capacity to resource build, what happens? You now lack the attributes that women are looking for reproduction. And that means the future generation of men who reproduce now, they have those attributes and they'll be stronger in the next generation. I think it's just,
Right.
I think it's like we don't see every single animal in the wild reproducing. Those ones that are weak just don't reproduce because humans are a mixture between pair bonding and tournament species. Well, you're competing with other men. It's not just a matter of like, and I say this, I like to use this term, we don't have relationship socialism in human beings. Oh, well, you get a woman, you get a woman, you get a woman. It doesn't matter if you're good or not. It doesn't matter if you're fit or not. It doesn't matter if you have a job. Here's your woman. You know, we don't have this in Western society or in any society for that matter. And I don't think we should. It's just like any
It's
job.
just
I don't want to be given a job for just because I'm black and you meet a quota. You shouldn't be given a woman just because you're a guy and you want to empty your sack into somebody. You just don't get a woman just because you want one. You have to have the
right.
attributes that you're looking for. And a lot of men
Although,
don't have those attributes and they're not willing to get them. They think that, okay, I need to go back to the 1950s where things were like it was better back then. But it's like in the 1950s, you wouldn't have those attributes either. You're just not that guy. And that's not sour grapes. I'm
well,
not crapping on guys, but it's just like, it's that message we go back way back to the beginning of our conversations. It's the same thing that Andrew Tate told guys: make your money, get your head self together, get in shape, you know, and be a better man and take care of your families. And a lot of guys aren't willing to do that, unfortunately.
also, I mean, there's a question about what it. how good is it for children to have, well, to be living in a polygamous family? And I don't know if you have any kids, how does that play out?
I have 10 kids. I have 10 kids. It works fine. Um, Obviously, it can be problematic, but it also depends on the women. Like if the women are at conflict and at odds with each other, then automatically this is gonna transcend and bubble over into like the family as a whole. I can take my children from either household to either household. There's no problem, you know. But if the women are at odds and they're at combat, then she hates that woman. Then any sort of connection with her, even if that connection is through me in terms of the child is going to be generally unwelcomed. So this is something you have to manage as a man. This goes back to the conversation of male leadership. If you're a bad leader and you're having problems like that, then then there's something wrong. You need to rectify or correct. Or maybe you didn't vet properly. I wrote a book on vetting women, and you got the wrong women, and that's your fault. You know, it can have negative outcomes on the children, but if you handle it properly and you see it as a family, then it should be okay.
So, like in general, in a society, would you say that it would function, generally speaking, what would you recommend to a society to function better? Polygamous, monogamous, or whatever works for people?
Whatever works for people. I don't get into people's relationships. I don't
Mm,
consider myself the
I
private
see.
parts police. My opinion is do what you want to do. Just make sure you do whatever you do very well. And I'm here to help guys. My general platform is to help guys who choose to be polygynous. And a lot of guys want to be polygynous. If you want to do it right. The last thing we need in society is more women who have been slept with and they no longer have a partner. We need less women who have end up becoming single moms because you couldn't handle your business correctly. Our society needs less of that, and I want to see less of that. So if you're actually going to pick this path, then make sure you're good at it and make sure you stick to it. You know, just like your parents stayed together for 50 years and they made it work, whatever else, make it work for 50 years with these multiple women. I actually failed at this many times. I admit it. I've probably made every failure in the book, but that's why I'm an expert, because now I got it working and I got it working well, because I didn't just take the L's, I took the L's and the lessons with it. And so now nobody can actually, well, not nobody, but I've seen almost everything that people come with. It's like, okay, you don't have a new case here. This is how you get past that hurdle. And so I
Right.
don't care what people
Yeah.
do. Just do it well. Make sure you stay together. You know, make sure your kids come up in, a very functional and happy family. And that's sometimes
Now,
harder.
what's your take on the other side of polygamy? The female version. I don't know what is it called. Polyamory, polyamorous relationships. What's your take on that?
It's madness. It's madness. It doesn't make any sense. Biologically, for a man, what sense does it make to be in a situation like that? You don't know if that's your kid, unless you do what do you call this, a DNA test or something like that. And if it's not your kid,
Right.
are you going to invest a whole bunch of time in a relationship with that woman, not knowing if she's going to have your kid, and you're taking care of that kid and
Mm,
whatever else, not your own. And you're like, what the hell am I doing here? I get some strange every once in a while when maybe she's happier with that guy sexually than she is with you, and then therefore it's reflected in your sexual activity. Men are very territorial creatures. When we look in almost any species, the males have a territory and they have a harem. Almost all species, not all. And men are no different. We have our territory, our home, our castle, and then we're very territorial about our women. This is why we see online the woman is cheating and he attacks the other guy. Well, your woman is cheating. Why are you attacking the guy? It doesn't make sense. She's cheating, and that's your woman. They're
right.
very territorial.
Right.
He doesn't think logically at the moment, like my woman is here with that guy. He thinks that guy is intruding upon my territory, my space. So you have to be very broken as a man to accept that setup, because it goes against your very nature as a man.
Right, right. I think this is our fundamental disagreement. Because I believe that, well, if polyamory worked, actually, hey, it is what it is. But I just cannot get past the hurdles. Like, seeing from my perspective as a woman, having another woman in the household, I think I would kill the woman and the man and burn the house down. So in my opinion, just from
Tried
the
it.
psychological perspective,
Yeah.
it does not work. But
Have
then
you tried
maybe that's me, because
it?
here we're talking in averages, right?
Yeah.
So maybe as you take the society, maybe 30% of society, maybe for them it would work just fine to be
I'd like to do an
polyamorous,
exercise with
right?
you here. Let me ask you. Imagine in your mind the ultimate man for you. Obviously, there's going to be variations between every woman, but in your mind, the absolute peak man that you're like 10 kids right now. You meet that guy, You're hanging out with him, everything's going right, and then it turns out he has another woman. Are you going to throw that under the bus?
Unfortunately, I would. Um, but I know that not every woman would though.
I think
So
most women
yeah.
wouldn't. You'd be the exception. Most women would be like, yeah, I'll take this. Especially if he's proven to be able to provide you with resources and fulfill your emotional needs, your physical needs. Most women are going to be like, well, nothing's missing. This
Mm,
component here of him having another woman, it makes sense. Generally what I've seen from women and what I've from speaking to women, most of them are like, okay, if all the components are there, I'll take the L on this component because everything else is there. So
mm. I see.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it also speaks to why we see women primarily as gold diggers. Be because, some of these women are probably the women who are going to leave the guy the moment that the guy with better resources comes along. And there's actually like research done that a woman doesn't grieve as much when her husband dies as the other way around. And women seem to have a easier time getting over breakup than the husbands.
But that
So
makes sense.
in that sense, I think you can make a perfect case that women do go for, well, that a larger component of her attraction to the guy is resources than
Mhm,
the other way around. Like to me, I'm actually really, really not hypergamous.
mhm,
And I think that also plays in my answer, right? And well, a lot of women are more hypergamous than a lot of the men, and I
mhm.
think this is the result of that. Why they would go for that guy because everything is there. He's not necessarily mine totally,
Mhm.
but uh, like a larger proportion of my attraction to him is not the persona and intrinsic value anyway. It's a lot of intrinsic value, extrinsic value in there. So
Yes.
that's why that is the case. And that's why, like, some of these women have no problem switching.
Well, I think we're having a conversation now of the differentiating line, that determining line between men and animal. Now, obviously, what you're
Mhm.
speaking of is ethics, virtues, morals, and values. And despite me having like the human nature, um, give me 1 second. Despite me having human nature and desires, I have to have ethics, virtues, values, and morals that reflect my humanity. And this is why I'm against very
Mm.
much the very sleep around type of culture and mentality. It goes against what's morally and ethically correct for our society and what's good for our society. And it's the same thing with women. It's in my opinion, as long as you're single, it's fair to be hypergamous. Why should you not get the best possible man that you can? And if you are not committed to that man, I don't think she should be sleeping with any man that she's like courting. Differences of opinions here in terms of what Western society has and what I think. But if you're courting men and you're not committed to those men, then it's fair game to switch guys. That's perfectly fine. You should get the best deal possible. Even men do that. We go shopping for stuff, cars, whatever else. We don't just take the first deal we can get. We take the best possible deal we can get. I don't see a problem with women doing this in terms of their partners, because you're going to have children with this guy and you're probably going to have a family with him. It's perfectly fair. Now, once you make that decision, you should stick to it. This is where, in my opinion, the ethics, virtues, values, and morals come into play. And unfortunately, we
Right.
see these falling to the wayside in Western society as it moves further and further away from its religious background. As for, there was something else. What was it? This is what happens when I go on these rants.
Um, Women not being as attached to the intrinsic value of a man, and
I
as a
think it's
consequence of
biological.
that, they have a lot easier time
Yeah,
when
yeah. I
they,
think it's
when
biological.
they grieve for the death
Yeah,
of their man or after a breakup and so on.
I think this is biological, and I don't think there's anything that women can do about it. I don't know if they really should try to. Here's the reality: because men have like such a strong, polygynous, reproductive, drive. I think there's a somehow on a biological level. We're not getting all mystical here. An understanding that men come and go, and so it would make sense that she gains attachments and loses attachments quickly. It's also understood that men are protectors and maintainers on an individual and a societal level, and that men get killed, societies get overrun and overtaken by other invaders and whatnot. And so it makes sense that, she would biologically be ready to, make a hard and a clean break. If not, what would happen? That's if we say she has a long, strong attachment, which we like. Everybody
Right.
likes the idea of it. I like the idea of it, even though it goes against my understanding of what biology is. it would lead to like nothing but like pure psychological torture and damage. If her society was overrun, her man was killed, and then some other guy, an invader, comes in. Now she's a captive, and he starts sleeping with her, or whatever else. You know what I mean? If she can't separate her emotions, in that particular moment, how much psychological damage is a woman going to deal with? She's a whole lot. So I think it's a necessity
Mm.
biologically. Um, I think it has its limits, but yeah,
Right,
it's a
right.
very deep.
True, true.
How far do we want to go into this?
How do you define submission in a relationship?
That's a good one, because you know what, I have exceptionally submissive women, alhamdulillah, and I love it. But it's like one of those things that you live in. It's hard to describe because I've never been asked about it.
Hmm. Hmm.
How do I explain
Okay.
this?
Okay.
My definition of submission is just, okay, she is down for whatever I'm down for, just because I'm down for it. That sounds crazy, but if I want it, she wants to do it just because I want it, and that's basically the life I live. If I say, hey, my wife, she was just here. If I say, hey, go downstairs and make me tea, there's no, you can't make your own tea. I haven't tied my shoes in years. Both of my wives tie my shoes for me. When it's time for me to change households, I change households at sundown, and I put my shoes on. They come and they put their shoes on for me, and then they tie my shoes for me. It's not that I want it; it's
Mm.
just for them. That's something that they perceive as I find. What do you call it? I find pleasing, and I do find it pleasing. It's very foreign to me as a Westerner. It's something one of my non-Western, both of my wives are not from the West, that she instituted and brought in, and I just like, wow, it became the new standard. So
Mm.
that's submission for me. It's like she's going to do what it takes to please you and keep you happy. And then obviously, this is reversed also. I don't just like, I'm just not wandering around, hey, I'm the, cool guy. I take care of them also. It just
And
looks different.
also, it's not well. What you just said, it doesn't sound like a power play because I know that if you knew that it doesn't make her happy and that she doesn't want to do it, obviously you wouldn't expect her to do it. So
The
it's
last thing
like,
I want to do is degrade
it's a
my wife.
relationship.
Yeah,
Like the submission works for both parties because
yeah,
it seems to me that it makes the wives happy as well. And I think that if it makes the wives happy, why shouldn't it be that way? And this is where we come back to like have people have the freedom of choosing what type of relationships they want to have.
yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
to me personally, it wouldn't work because I think that just by nature I am pretty much the decision maker. Um I don't know if I would choose to be if I could choose my character, but that's just how I am. But I think it's important for people like us, well, and people like you to respect each other's views and to
Absolutely.
not like, because if I was one of those fucking insane radical feminists, I would say, well, who do you think you are to have wives tie your shoes, and I would just break it down to like the simplest
You'd be
thing,
amazed how often I
possible, and trying to make you look like an idiot. But
hear.
when you explain it, to me it's obvious that this is the best way for your relationship to function, and it
Yeah,
seems that it's functioning. And it also seems that if we try to artificially implement certain gender roles into your household and make them reverse, it would be a disaster because it's
absolutely.
just not your characters. You
Mm-mm.
have one man who is the decision maker. You have a pretty dominant personality. You're the type who prefers to make decisions, and you have women who prefer to follow decisions. I think you know, placing certain artificial societal norms into that relationship, I think is just as destructive as, well, take me for example, me and a partner, and putting us into traditional gender roles. We wouldn't be happy. So I
Yeah,
think that it's really it's important to open our minds and just not have an agenda. And this is why I wanted to have a conversation with you as well, because I have no agenda, but I want to hear what you say, right? And I'm curious, and I want the audience to hear as well. So and I like the fact that you realize that we speak in like in averages and general terms, and that there are exceptions to the rule, and you seem to have a very good sense of equality. You seem to be all up for the equality of opportunity, which is really good. You seem to be against equality of outcome, which is
that's
brilliant.
Sucks.
So yeah, so okay, so in your opinion, what are some fundamental disagreements that we have here? I mean, obviously we're gonna agree to disagree, but what do you think are like the basic disagreements so that we
Well,
can
I
kind of
mean, like the
summarize it for the audience?
definitely the military one. I 100%
The
disagree with
military
you.
one, yeah, yeah.
Military one.
Hmm.
There's just there's nothing inside my chest that would like allow for me to be at ease at any point, qualified or not, that I'd want to see women on the front lines of a battle. It just really from a a visceral, just animalistic point, is there's something inside me that always triggers. I sort of flinch when I see it, and I'm like, ooh, like no,
Mm.
why? Just don't, we definitely disagree on there. um I did have some personal questions. I was curious about some stuff, but when you were talking about like children and whatnot, I'm just curious. Do you have any children, if you mind me asking?
No,
Okay. Do you
no.
have a pet?
A partner?
A pet, like a
Sorry,
dog?
you kind of cut out there.
Do you have like a pet, a dog or a cat or something like that?
I do not have pets, no.
Interesting. Okay. And do you mind if I ask
No.
your age?
28.
28. Okay. Interesting. You do have a partner, right?
I do not have a partner either.
A partner. Okay. This is very interesting. Wow, okay. And okay.
Now, do I plan on having a partner and kids?
Yes.
I look, I don't know. Um, sometime you passively seek a relationship, which
Hmm.
means that you're not on dating sites. I'm not a
Yes.
huge fan of dating sites. But if someone comes along, well, you welcome them, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, like my criteria for a partner, which is something you didn't ask, but I'm gonna answer anyway, because what the fuck? Um, is someone I do value loyalty a lot, so a polygamous relationship is not gonna work out for me. Um, and well, as someone who is not necessarily hypergamous, I do want to have someone who works. I do not want to be the sole provider. Or if I am, I still want him to work to do something, right? Not to be a couch potato. I'm very visual, so I look for good looks. And what
Can I
else?
can I make a weird request?
Um,
Can I make a weird request?
all
It's
right.
not nothing. It's nothing crazy. Your fingers. Can you do like this for me? Can I see?
Sorry. Let me see, because I have my notes over. Let's see. What do you want me to do?
If I can see your hands like this, just go like this. Uh, okay. Okay. Interesting.
The other
Now,
one? The other one?
no, it's
The
the same. It doesn't matter. I'm just asking because
Okay.
basically, now this finger, your ring finger,
Okay.
if it's longer
Right.
than your index finger, yes, then that means in the womb you are exposed to a higher level of testosterone, which makes you have a specific type of mentality and thinking. Now, obviously, your ring finger is shorter than your index finger. No, it's almost level.
Correct.
So the longer it is, both in males and females, the more they have like of a masculine mind. And the shorter this finger is, the more they have a feminine mind. And so I'm just curious about, so then I would,
Let me
it has to be very straight. It's usually done with the hand flat on the table, but I think that'd be asking too much. That's why I just said like this. I'm just curious, like, um, yeah. So you have a pretty decent technical understanding. Do you work in some sort of like tech field or anything like that?
uh option trading.
Yeah, there we go. See, okay, so it makes sense. So yeah, you do have like
Yeah.
because we look at like the length of your index finger and your ring finger, you
Right,
probably
right,
go to a
right,
higher level
right.
of testosterone in the
Huh.
womb, and so you have a more masculine nature because of that. Because it does affect the
Right.
development of the brain, but you still are a
Yeah.
woman, obviously. So
Right,
your
right.
standard position and like what I'm hearing kind of makes sense. This is the type of stuff I do in
Yeah.
terms of like relationships and determining what's going on in them when people are having problems, but they want to be together. These are the types of things you have to look at.
Which, by the way, which I think is part of the reason why we're able to have like a chilled, rational conversation. Because
Wait,
if I'm, maybe if I was very feminine, I'd be all up in my feelings right now. How dare you say that all women? I disagree 100%.
probably.
Maybe even you're gonna have some, if I post this, maybe we'll get comments from like these crazy, feminists, like, "Oh my God, you two are so fucking."
I have to deal with them quite a bit. Trust me, it's not fun.
Anyway, last question. What's
Yes.
your advice to incels?
It was never meant to be easy. Never. Nothing was ever meant to be easy. This is the mission, guys. Go out, work hard. This is a matter of build it and they will come. If you want to be in a relationship, you're not striving and working hard for the relationship. The relationship comes to you. You build it, it will come, and you get to dictate the terms. It was never meant to be easy, guys. It's not easy. Nothing in life is easy. A lot of you incel guys have good, hard working careers, and you haven't translated that into your relationship, and it's the same thing. Everything you work at, you get good at. And so make sure you're the best possible version of yourself, and you will, inshallah, attract the best possible person for you if that's what you're looking for. If you're not looking for a partner and you're not looking for a woman, then enjoy your life and stop calling yourself an incel. Just go live life, man. Just be happy. Making my understanding of incel is like, involuntarily celibate. It's like it's a part of your personality, not being with somebody. Don't make it part of your personality if that's what you actually want. Just go live your life and be happy. But if you actually want to be, you don't want to be celibate, then make yourself the best version of yourself, the richest version of yourself, the most fit version of yourself, the most socially adept and acumen, related person, and you will see the results. If you might not think you have to do this for a woman, why should I have to do this for a woman? You should expect from your woman the best also. She should be the fittest that she can be. She should be the smartest that she can be. She should be, if you're looking for it, the most submissive version of that she should be. And you deserve it after putting in the work, just like she deserves to have the best possible man she can get. It's a yin and a yang. You deserve the best woman you can get if you put in the work, and she deserves the best man she can get if she can put in the work. And this is local. You're competing globally, but understand that locally you can't beat it. You're right there, and the guy who's 10,000 miles away can't compete with you if you're right there and you're doing the right things. That's my advice to the incel community.
Right. And also, maybe for incels, I would say that these are men who perceive their intrinsic value as extremely low, like probably at the very bottom. And I would say that, well, by the way, this is something that we disagree on a little bit too. I think that men also have like a huge intrinsic value. I would necessarily
They do.
see men as with more extrinsic value than intrinsic. So with the incels, I would say that um you are, well, you are not all that you could be. You should definitely strive for more, but at the moment, you know, I think you can already start placing like requirements on women. Don't just take everything that comes your way.
Absolutely.
Have standards, Not every woman is, you don't have to act as her fan,
Mm,
and women don't like that, by the way. If
correct.
you're gonna act as a fan, he's gonna treat you like one. So
Yes,
have your standards, and well, and
absolutely.
you are valuable.
Yes, society can't doesn't like men that don't provide value though. Society as a whole, in general,
Yes,
nobody likes men that doesn't provide value. So you know,
right.
that's just part of the game, man. That's why I said life is not easy. It was never meant to be easy. Nobody respects that. Not men, not women. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, thank you so much. Wow, we had a long conversation there.
Yeah, yeah, it was.
Jesus Christ.